And that brings us to our first question. Eric, I might hand over to you to begin the conversation. And the question that we want to pose is, what is marketing's role in developing these out-of-market accounts, and how can data support that? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, I love the stats, the ones from Bain as well as the ones from our own research. And to me, what those stats show is that it's really our role as marketers to shape perception and to position ourselves as that vendor of choice before our sales team has a meaningful opportunity to engage with them. And so what is marketing's role? Our role really is, how do we become the chosen solution before we have an opportunity oftentimes to have any meaningful, in-depth, human, face-to-face, one-to-one conversation. The problem all of us have as marketers, though, is we've got a big target market and our budget's not quite that big, right? And so one of the biggest challenges is, how do we prioritize who we're focused on? And here, when we're talking about out of market, I really want to break that into two groups. I want to talk about the ones that we don't really know are in market yet, but if we had the right data and signals, we'd realize that they're probably in those early stages. And so how do we actually go, hey, there's a time-sensitive opportunity here to build ourselves into one of their first choices over a relatively short period of time, because I've got some advance warning that they're likely actually in market, even though my traditional signals don't pick that up. And then the other thing I have is, I've got some folks that even if they're not showing any of those signs, they're some of the best fit companies and buyers for us. How do I take a long-term approach, prioritize that small portion of my overall target market so that I can build that perception and build that position over time? So I break that role of marketers into those two groups. And without data, we can't tell the difference between who's a great fit or who's in those early stages, and which one we probably should be deprioritizing right now in order to put more of our budget and resource where it needs to go. So that prioritization decision, that's a huge, huge piece where data comes into play.
Okay, definitely. Yeah. I mean, clearly that makes a lot of sense, right? Knowing where to look, and particularly when, at that point of the journey, it is pretty hard to see. But Ron, any thoughts on this as well, as someone who's basically at the coalface, trying to uncover these accounts and these companies?
Yes, as a marketeer, again, out of market, in market are two segments that we talk about. A well-known fact, typically in a market that you operate in, whichever, less than 5% or near about 5% people are really in the market at that moment of time, and the remaining 90-95% or even more could not be in the market at that moment, which means looking to purchase something in near term. Now, this differs greatly based on what business you are in. In my experience, I've done both B2C and B2B. Typically, for a company like ours, it could be anywhere between 6 to 8 months. So as you can see, it's a long cycle. And in certain cases, in larger deals, enterprise deals can run into years as well. I used to work in a company where this could easily be 18 months, because what people were buying were high value and required way more capital enrollment, and that takes time. So keeping that in mind, marketing has a huge role, especially for out of market, because another concept I use personally is, again, a well-known concept, nothing that I'm going to create here, is you have demand creation and demand capture. So typically, out of market accounts or individuals are something I will put into demand creation, the long term. As I said, because only a few people in the market are there to convert in that quarter or a period of time, and you, along with all your competition, is right after them. And I think, personally speaking, that's actually the slightly easier part of the problem, because there are tools, and with help of data, some of them are provided by companies like Sixth Sense, and Infuse also has certain services I'm sure that can help there. Again, I'm not endorsing anybody here. I'm just making a point. And those can help you find those people for demand capture. Demand creation, in my opinion, is the holistic marketing. Something that I think, we are moving a little away from, and we all marketeers are guilty of it, because everybody wants quick results. Holistic marketing is about going from awareness to affinity, and it takes time. It's the power of the brand which pulls people back. I think there was a piece of data just before this. I think it's a one from Bain saying that 84% times the first person who contacts the buyer gets the deal. I would say is another piece of data which says that in most of the cases the buyer has already made up his or her mind,
Mm.
who they want to go after. It could be the incumbent, or it could be somebody that they are really impressed with. That's the affinity part, because they have seen them doing something, they are subconsciously sitting in their minds.
Yep.
So out of market, I think marketing teams have a huge role to play, because this is where the rubber meets the road. You know, do some sense classic marketing using most updated or latest technology available, which is data, which is AI. I'm sorry, bringing AI into everything, but what is available, you've got to use it and do classic marketing and try and create that space subconsciously in the minds of your potential buyers, and that will be fruitful over a period of time. Again, easier said than done, but it's
Yeah.
a responsibility of marketer to get into that direction and go towards that goal.
Yeah, and you make a really interesting point about going back to that traditional marketing, and I think that's something we'll touch on later. But obviously, there's a lot of pressures around, right, in terms of hitting short-term goals. So not always afforded that luxury. But I mean, yeah, it's something that we will touch on a bit more. But Mukesh, as someone who's again in market, talking to a lot of marketers like Rohan, what sort of things do you hear when it comes to this type of conversation? And again, how do you think data can come in and play a role here? Like Eric said, obviously with prioritization, but is there anything else you would add?
Sure, Marcelo, thank you. And of course, there are some very interesting things that Eric mentioned about making sure that you're in touch, right? And this
Mm.
is where you're able to build perception. And perception is everything in terms
Yeah.
of making sure when you push these accounts throughout your buyer journey, it starts with that perception and then results into an engagement, right, with these buyers. So you got to make sure that you start there. And of course, my role every day is to talk to minimum 2 to 3 different marketers. So you know what? A lot of times when we're talking to marketers, and if you look at the KPIs of marketers today, there's a significant overlap with sales, which means honestly, if you were to ask every sales guy in the world, they want to talk to those 5%. They don't care about those 95%, and it somehow sometimes seeps into your marketing thought process. But the fact is, you know what, before you push this into the 5%, which is where honestly the rubber meets the road, the journey that you establish when they're not in those 5%, when they're out of the market, when they're in early stage, is very, very important, right? It's everyone wants it's like this, you know what, as parents everyone wants a good successful child, but the fact is you have to start early. You cannot say, okay, let this guy be 24 years and I'll start my job. No, you start early, from day one. And this is exactly what marketing has to keep in mind. You have to identify your ICP, look at what you want to go after, and start with your activities from day one in terms of making sure that you have those touch points. Those touch points are very important. I mean, there are tons of researchers that clearly say that you need minimum 22 to 25 touch points before someone
Yep.
notices you. So it's marketing's role to make sure that you establish those touch points. Now, these touch points actually act as an air cover when you land your sales guys into these into these buying committees, when you land your sales guys into these sales pitches. So it's very, very important you start early. Now, what will happen in the last 30% of your buying journey is actually governed by what you did in the first 70%. So it's very, very important that marketers not only understand that, hey, you have to start from day one in terms of engaging these accounts. And see, we also need to understand a lot of time brands, these whatever your ICPs, your buying committees, they change jobs, right? It's important that you keep in touch. If you don't do that, the next new person coming in would have no idea. So you have to make sure that you build that seamless buying journey, and it is an always on. The next 5% is a result of the first 95% engagement. So that's what we practice, that's what we preach.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on from that, what I want to know now is, and again, might start with you, Rohan, in this question, in terms of once we've identified that accounts have moved into an in-market category, that they're showing some intent, they're showing some behavior that's favorable, what's marketing's role to support these accounts. And when I say marketing's role, I mean marketing motions, so not necessarily just supporting sales in terms of generating leads, MQLs, etc. What are some of the things that marketing can continue to do to move these accounts forward from a marketing perspective? So I'm curious as to that. So once accounts have essentially self-selected based on their behavior and their activity, rather than just purely handing off to sales, what are some of the things that marketing can do using data to continue to carry the conversation forward?
So at this stage, when somebody's in market, in most of the times, 80% times they are known now, which means you know them. And by known, it could be the name, email ID, etc., etc. So from unknowns, they have moved to unknown. But yes, they might be in the market, but they're not ready to buy immediately because you still have to massage them. I call it massage. Sorry if somebody takes offense to the word. Engagement is the more formal word for it. Now, again, huge scope in today's world as a marketeer. So the idea is to keep up that engagement or that massage going on till the time, ideally, in an ideal scenario, what I love would be this person raises their hand and say, hey, now make me talk to a human being. Because at this stage, in most cases, again, high probability, 90% plus, whatever the touch point, I think Mukesh touched on a point, touch points has been typically in the today's world digital or virtual. There's no human contact per se. This individual would have seen maybe an advertising or a press article about my brand or my company. In an ideal journey, would have come to my website, and I know them. There's technology behind and data which can help me know who came to my website. Could be an unknown till now. I could have captured this person through a variety of services, and then I can match make with who came to my website. So it's a known, and now this person sits in my database. I can, start a conversation, which is typically one way to begin with this individual, which is based on a value exchange of content. And so from my side, my value prop to this individual is a piece of content, bases all the data that I've seen about this individual to enhance their experience or help them find what they're looking for. And if I can make that process frictionless by making it more personalized, understanding the journey, the faster this person will move into the direction that I want that person to move. Again, it's all very idealistic, the world that I'm talking about. And as this engagement with this individual continues on a one-to-one basis, so it has to be personalized, understanding their needs, their wants, what they're looking for potentially, or trying to put them into a tangent that you feel they might be more interested in. And then the next logical step is to, at this stage, is to try to bring a human being into it. Now, variety of ways of doing it. You could have maybe an SDR, in case you have one, outsource or in-house, to look at these signals and the interaction and engagement with you and then make a connection. Or it could be that what we've seen, at least in this part of the world, I can speak for APJ more than other parts of like North America, I'm sure Eric can have examples there, is to try and get them into a human contact, which is a physical contact, which is ideally through an event or to a physical event or a virtual event, which kind of gives them that little pedestal of importance and gives you that precious time with them. And from there, I feel marketing job is to, at that level, basis again, these are more than signals now. That person will give it to you. You can qualify this level and then hand over, depending on your structure in the company, to an SDR or to an account executive, depending on what account they come from. So typically, in our case, enterprise accounts go to AEs, and the long tail commercial accounts typically are governed by the SDRs to a partner. Again, this could differ from company to company, but that's typically what you'll see in a lot of companies. So again, as you saw, there's huge scope of marketing even after an identification of somebody who has shown clear intent. Again, I want to be very clear. Intent is a little over abused word. I call them signals. And for me, intent is when somebody raises their hand. It's like a declared intent, saying, I want to be contacted. I want to be spoken to.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned a few key words there, and I'm sure that both Eric and Mukesh are chomping at the bit to jump in here, but I'll go to Mukesh first.